Welcome back to the Rise and Roar podcast, everybody. I'm here with Josiah from FYREBRAND. How you doing, man?
I am doing well. How about you?
Very, very good. Very good. This month, we are doing our Blacklight series where we are featuring gothic, industrial metal, synth pop, dark wave, all that kind of good stuff. Josiah, you are on the heavier side
Oh, yeah.
of people that we're interviewing this month. So tell us about FYREBRAND. What genre, what kind of style of music? Tell us about the heavy stuff.
So the way I normally describe it to somebody in 30 seconds or less is that it's industrial metal, and it's in a similar vein to Static X and Fear Factory. Those are usually the two most well-known artists that I can compare it to. And I think the part of the flavor that, is unique to FYREBRAND is that it's not just driving and heavy. It does have a good amount of groove and hooks to it, and it's instrumental writing, and a large part of that is because I'm just as influenced by video game soundtracks as I am artists that I enjoy. But that's kind of like the style of the music, and the angle that many of the lyrics come at is winning spiritual battles, whether it's spiritual or practical battles, because I do believe that the Bible has as much to say about how we go through this life practically as we do spiritually. And so from one angle or another, it's either about winning spiritual battles or winning temporal battles.
Very good. And all that is definitely wrapped up in FYREBRAND's music, even to the extent you mentioned your enjoyment of or influence of some of the video game culture. You've even got a whole album that's packaged like one of the old school video game cartridges. Am I right?
Yeah, like an old PlayStation 1
Yeah.
game disc, and with a lot of low polygon imagery.
Yeah.
Kind of a little evolution to the imagery that I had started back in the original Beat the Machine days. And as I was revisiting a lot of those tunes, I figured I would work on trying to update that imagery and poke around with it and have some fun with that sort of slide to it.
So what led you to industrial metal? Is that just part of your DNA? Is that something you fell in love with at some point? What inspired that for FYREBRAND?
I think the large reason that I decided to go with it, one, there's a lot of room for creativity when you're dealing with a hybrid genre. The enjoyment that I have for the genre goes back as far as whenever I became a metalhead. I had really awesome parents that got me into, first they got me into the more like the rock stuff, like Petra, Matthew Ward, and things like that. But then later, about around 13, my dad showed me Mortification, Tourniquet,
Nice.
Living Sacrifice,
Yeah.
and all of those other greats that started off. And then in the midst of all that, he showed me the pocket of industrial acts that were going on at the time: Circle of Dust, Clank, Mortal, Chatterbox, and Argyle Park, where they all kind of collaborated. And that Argyle Park Misguided album is actually very near and dear to my heart, because that is what got me into industrial.
That is a phenomenal album.
Yeah. But
I could listen to that over and over again and still not, peel everything away that they've got layered in there.
Oh, absolutely. And so that's where kind of the seeds were planted. And I had opportunities here and there to kind of build bands that had varying degrees of success. And circling back around to check out some old industrial stuff that I was wanting to listen to and maybe get some inspiration from for a new project, I then ended up coming across Clayton, who is Circle of Dust and Cell Dweller and everything. I wasn't up to date with everything that he was doing as far as Cell Dweller. I thought everything just ended after Disengage was released in 97,
Yeah.
but turns out there was a whole lot that more that was going on. And as I'm catching up, I watched one of his videos about how he just breaks down his electronic rock production, and I was like, I can do that.
Hmm.
That's where Firebrand started. And so in the summary of all of that, it's like I like how the genre blending can bring about creative opportunities, and then there's a lot of places in my history that not only is it enjoyable, but I found a lot of inspiration with people who do that. So that's what I decided to pursue.
That's very cool. I remember listening, and honestly, there have been times I've listened to Firebrand, and I can hear the various influences, just because if you're immersed in that, for the past 20, 30 years, you love it so much, you can pick out those influences. And sometimes I think, man, this guy needs to go on tour with Clank, and that would be a good pairing. But I remember an interview that Clank did years ago. I forget with who. It may have been with Mark Solomon. I don't know, but he was talking about how back in the day, in New York, when him and Clayton were creating stuff, and how they had maybe like one of those voice recorders they'd put up next to a TV where they press play on a VCR. And
Yeah.
that's basically the equipment they had to do what they did back then. And then, of course, layer in the guitars and everything, and how much farther ahead we've come today with
Oh yeah.
technology, and how much more we can do. But you still go back to those first beginnings in this genre, and you're still amazed at what they pulled off.
Oh yeah. The limitations are honestly sometimes the best ways to squeeze the best creativity out of you, because if you're given an endless sandbox, you're kind of get choice paralysis. I want to throw some of this
Hmm.
in there and that in there, but then if you got like a very narrow set of things to work with and a lot of limitations, you're gonna be forced to figure out ways to get from point A to point B, and that's produced some of the best creative works in any sort of medium.
Yeah,
No, not limited to them.
yeah, I totally agree with that. I was watching some videos this week on layering some electronic music. And I got about halfway through some of them, and I thought, this is just way too much. I'm just going to go minimalistic. I'm going back to the beginning. Might play single notes on a little shortened keyboard.
There you go.
So you just came off of tour, am I correct? Or are you still in the middle of it?
I just came off of it.
Just came off
As
of it.
far as we know, I think we're about done with shows for the year, unless there's some opportunity that kind of comes out, that's a little more short notice or whatever. But as far as we know, we're done for the year.
Okay. Tell me about the tour. How did that go? What was that about? Because you were part of something pretty unique there. Am I right?
Yeah. So the bulk of where our traveling around was at was what our involvement in what's called the Extreme Tour. And the summary of what they do, it's a musical missions trip.
Hmm.
They take their time going from city to city, usually spending about 2 or 3 days there, depending on if there needs to be like a rest and recoup day. But there's usually um, event day, which is when the music's actually being played and the people in the community come and enjoy the music, and there's a gospel presentation and people that are available to pray with folks or meet whatever needs that they have that are available there. um and there's a lot of prep work that goes into that as well, building the stage and putting together the speakers and the sound equipment, and it's all very much grassroots, and everybody's involved in boots on the ground with this. And um, there's a whole system to how that's put together. But the day before event day is that's outreach day. That is while everybody is broken off into teams to go and promote the event, that it's what they constantly say is that that's a means to just strike up conversations with folks. If the moment allows, pray with them, listen to them if they got some stuff they got to get off their chest, share the gospel with them, whatever the moment allows for. Is just promoting the event is the way that we get to talk to people. In fact,
Mhm.
they call it search and rescue, but it's basically outreach, and that is how we get folks to these events and everything. But even if they don't show up, that oftentimes gives us the chance to have some very divinely appointed moments with some folks. I'll go into one or two later, but I'm answering the main question here, where like that gives an idea as to what type of tour this is, where it's very ministry first,
Yeah.
and it's um it's structured around that, and it's very um like I said, it's a very grassroots type of effort. We spent 2 cities with them, Columbia, Tennessee, and Clarksville, Tennessee. So that was about a total of 5 days with them. We went to Kingdom Come Fest at the end of that to uh, join the label in an effort to play songs and pay tribute to David Patacone. And then after a week and a half or so upon returning, then we went out to Audio Feed for a handful of days on 4th of July weekend, played the Subculture stage with a lot of buddies of ours, and got to check out some other bands before coming home. And now we're recovering.
Nice. Yeah, and audio feed was wet, from what I understand, just
Very,
completely soaked.
very.
I think I saw a picture, you or maybe Ash from Autopsy Sid. I don't remember who was taking a video and just showing this downpour that was just it almost looked like it was coming in the tent, weighing the tent down. It was pretty brutal.
The worst of it was actually sometime after that video was taken, because
Mm,
so that was Saturday. And I remember very distinctly, it was like 3:30 p.m. We were coming in, and this was after I already got my crew and I registered at the entrance and getting sopping wet in the process. Then when we pulled up to the back entrance where it would be easier to get to the Subculture stage, I went out ahead of everybody to just see what the situation was, and I turned the corner to see that there was like 4 inches of water collected on the ground in
wow.
that tent. They had put 2 subwoofer speakers on a pallet that they happened to find to keep them out of the water. But you were going to be sloshing. It was going to either be mosh pit just like slinging water around, or if what would be really funny is if people had like these air rafts or something and they just do bumper cars out in the
Yeah,
out
that'd
in
be
the
cool.
crowd there. That would be really funny.
Yeah. You gotta go back for a second. I want
Hmm.
to talk about your dad. What a cool dad. You
Yeah.
jumped from like Petra and Matthew Ward to Mortification. You don't even do the Striper stopover. you
Well, I
go
mean that
you go straight to Mortification. That is really cool.
that is cool. I mean, I think like Striper and White Cross and everything were kind of
Yeah.
like transitory, but it was a quick transition.
Yeah.
Um,
Those are
and
some good days of music.
oh yeah, and it was awesome that my parents really did see that. Like they were really supportive not only of what I liked, but they could see the aspiration that I had to do music. And as
Yeah.
obnoxious as I was with it whenever I was a teenager, they were very glad to just stick it out whenever I was like growling in the shower and all that other stuff, so
Yeah.
that like, I could do what I love doing.
So let me go back to those days. Did you start out with the heavy industrial? Did you start out in another genre, punk rock or something? What did you cut your teeth on, or did you just jump right in?
When I got into heavy music, it really started off with death metal. Like it really just clicked and made sense to me that like I want to be in a gospel centric metal band, and it was kind of like it initially started off wanting to be a Mortification clone, and then over time, and mostly because of opportunities available, what I was like genres that I ended up being involved in kind of evolved. So there was actually a project that I was involved in before Firebrand kicked off, and that was a Canadian-based project called Placate the Masses,
Hmm.
and that started from a guy over in Canada accidentally friended the wrong Josiah on Facebook, and from that accidental meeting, yeah, we had a lot in common and we had a lot of similar interests. And this guy DJ, he was a phenomenal instrumentalist and was learning to do some basic production at the time. So we swapped audio files back and forth, and we got a couple other guys off and on in the project, and that really substantiated it. We had a couple of releases. We had a short tour that went on in 2017 before the project really kind of ran out of steam because life happened and we all just couldn't really be as involved in it as we were at that point. But that was more of like, that was metalcore, but it was more thrash leaning metalcore where it was very guitar driven, very riff driven, um, and back in the day, I sounded a little more like Bruce Fitzhugh from Living Sacrifice.
Well, it's not a bad thing.
Oh no, not at all.
Those guys are awesome.
Hmm.
You had a couple stories you said from that tour that you wanted to share. Let's go back and talk about that. What do you want to share about some of your experiences on that tour?
Um, Definitely one of like those moments where once you're out and about and outreach, and then you suddenly like you meet that person and you realize, oh yeah, this is why I'm here. We had a fella. It was over in Clarksville. We were. It was I, my wife, and two other artists that were going up and down the river walk, and I think we ended up going way farther than we were supposed to. Um, but we crossed paths with a dude who was very down on his luck, and he was just in a very hopeless state, um, mentally very depressed. The lady that was with us who struck the conversation up with him first. It didn't take long in the conversation before he said something along the lines of, I wanted to come out and see the sunset one last time before I died.
Wow. Mm.
So that was, that made it very clear that like that was the reason why we were here. And he had a call that he had to take. And so he stepped off for a little while, but we were very intent on making sure we kept eyes on him while we were going back and forth doing some other stuff. And then once we were able to, um, catch him on the way back, we got to know him a little more, got to kind of see how he got to where he was at. Um, Seemed like some stuff was being dealt, some of it was about being dealt a bad hand, some other parts of it was like, okay, you kind of made your bed and are now having to lie in it type of thing. But after taking time to just be a friend to him and being there to listen to him and um, be present with him, then we got to share the gospel with him and said to him, you have value because you're made in the image of God and nobody can take that away. And, you know, we care about you, God cares about you, and that's why he sent Jesus to pay for your redemption. And we prayed with him and we invited him out to the event. I mean, we didn't end up seeing him the next day, but we let that hope in and believing that that interaction had some sort of impact to him, even if we may not see it. But that was one of those very clear moments. Like, even if obviously this guy doesn't end up hearing the music, he wasn't part of, at the event, but that still was a divinely appointed moment. And that was something where, because we were out doing what we were doing, Jesus got to reach out to somebody because of that.
Yeah. That is so awesome. And that is the moment where you realize this is what it's all about. This is
Yeah.
what we're here for, and this is why we do what we do. And those are encouraging moments, not just because somebody has received some compassion and some care and there's an impact in their lives, but it's an encouragement also to you because, a lot of times, especially, with bands and artists that are out there, you're grinding it out day after day, and you sometimes don't ever see the fruit of your labor,
Hmm.
and you just keep going. And those moments, it's just like, I don't know, sometimes for me, it's like drinking from a fire hose. It's like, okay,
Hmm.
here it is. I've been thirsty for so long to see some fruit, but here it is. And like you said, you don't know the end result, but you do know that God puts you in that moment and he's
Yeah.
doing a work in that man's life.
Yeah. And that's something I've had to come to terms with a good while ago, because I've always really had a heart for evangelism, and that's been something that, age 17 was whenever I started really taking my faith seriously. And um, inevitably, there's that point in time, if anybody takes sharing the gospel seriously, you're seeing a lot more either rejections or, no, not today,
Right.
types of things. And uh, like anybody in that situation, I've had my bouts with discouragement. And I believe that the within the confines of His Word, the Lord still speaks today, and that the something that He said to me that I take with me all the time is that every street lamp on the road leading home is important. You have no
Mm,
earthly idea which lamp you are in the journey. The point is that you just be faithful where you're at on their journey home. And yeah, that's the thing that you have to focus on. And
yeah.
that's where I often find encouragement, because you're probably going to get a lot more no's than you do yeses, and the yeses are wonderful. But in the cases where you get a lot of people that are either like, no, not today, or they don't want what you have, they don't want to hear you, you know, taking comfort in knowing that you did what the Lord told you to do, you did your
Hmm.
job, and you leave the results up to Him. That does a lot to kind of help ease your mind in that whole endeavor.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good word. I like the word about the street lamp and just being lit, staying lit,
Hmm.
being ready. That's a good thought to contemplate. Um, Tell me about the music. Albums out. I'm gonna be honest with you. Probably my favorite Firebrand album is about 2 or 3 years old now. Vengeance
Hmm.
is Mine.
Mm.
Um, I think I could put that one on repeat and love it, love it, love it, love it. It's just,
Thank you.
it's heavy, it's thick, it's got a great message. But you have some newer stuff out. I think you've got a single out
Hmm.
pretty recently, if I'm not mistaken. Um, Just Go Away. Is that
Yeah.
right? And so talk to us about some of the music, past, present, what's coming up. Give us the big picture on Firebrand's music right now.
All right. Um, as I mentioned before, the through the thread that weaves through just about all Firebrand songs is winning spiritual battles, whether it be or spiritual or physical battles. And Just Go Away is kind of it's leading up to a body of work that's going to be no different as far as those themes are concerned, but it's going to be a lot more focused in the respect that it's going to be talking about addiction. This body of work is going to be an EP called Heavy Chains. And
Hmm.
anybody who's been paying attention and kind of seen how the material has evolved over the years. Back in 2021, when I released the original Beat the Machine album, there was a song on there called Heavy Chains, and that was a song that was a more pep talkish type of song that encouraged people who are on the road to recovery. And it was the feel of it, rather more than the words, but the feel of it was like, hey, you started the journey. Good job. You made a great decision. We're rooting for you. And then on the follow-up album, Vengeance is Mine, uh, as I was figuring out what I wanted to write for some of the last few songs in that writing cycle, I wanted to revisit the topic of addiction recovery because anybody who's tried to get free of anything knows that there's going to be a lot of downs in that journey. There's a lot of stumbling, falling, and low points where you just feel like you absolutely suck and may not even know if you are going to get free, and you may not even be able to imagine life without this habit that you're trying to get away from. And I wanted to write a song that spoke to those moments and encourage people that are going through those moments that, yeah, you can get up from these, and that, remember, there is a better life ahead than where you're currently at, and keep putting your eyes on that and fighting for it. And so that was what ended up on Vengeance is Mine as Heavy Chains 2. And that was the song that, as we were performing it live in 24, 25, especially, that I had a lot of people, especially once they got the context for what the song was, whenever I would introduce it, I'd have a lot of people coming up to me saying, hey, this was what I've been struggling with. Could you pray for me? Or they're sharing their victories of like, hey, I've been going to Celebrate Recovery or whatever program they've been involved in to try and get out of these, uh, these life altering habits. And it's like, I made it to 90 days sober. And it's like, hey, awesome. And the response that we had from that let me know that we were definitely onto something. And so, Heavy, like, basically, They Just Go Away is Heavy Chains 3. But since it's going to be leading up to a body of work that covers this topic en masse, or at least in a broader approach, uh, it was named Just Go Away to avoid redundancy. It's leading up to an EP that's going to be releasing, I'm hoping, about around in the middle of fall. That's what I'm ballparking it at. But it's going to be a 5-song EP that is going to have Just Go Away on there, re-recorded versions of Heavy Chains 1 and 2 with some titles changed, again, to reduce redundancy, and 2 others that have yet to been released. But Caleb, who plays guitar for me live, and I have been working on both of these new tracks that have yet to have been heard at this point, and we are very excited for people to hear this.
That is really cool. The continuity of a topic like that following through each of your albums and into the future. That's a really cool thing. I can't wait to hear that. That's going to be an exciting release.
I really hope that this continues to speak to a lot of people, because I know that there's such a addiction epidemic in our society. And I mean, you can be addicted to anything, but even the things that you would commonly suspect, between substance abuses to uh, pornography to, yeah, any other type of uh, things like eating disorders or like food addiction and so many other things. And of course, that's more symptomatic of, you know, wounds that are way deeper than what's seen, and those things having to be addressed and um, nursed so that they'll be able to actually get free and then start changing the habit for good. But that was what I was hoping to, be able to speak to with these songs and this subsequent EP, and I hope it continues to resonate with people as it starts to make its way out.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm excited to hear that. And thank you for addressing topics like that. A lot of people avoid addiction topics just for fear of saying something wrong or not knowing enough or offending somebody. But we've got to talk about it.
We do.
Even if we make a few missteps along the way, as long as we're compassionate and we're careful and we
Mhm.
care, I think we can make some headway. And there are a lot of people that are, in my opinion, there are a lot of people that are just kind of hiding in the shadows, afraid to do anything, and they're just stuck.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that it's mainstream, it's everywhere, addiction is everywhere, but especially in this culture, the groups that you're reaching, um, there's a lot of isolation. I don't know if you'd agree with that, but there's a lot of isolation, and people need to hear this from the stage.
Yeah.
And I talk to a lot of pastors and churches. I work with churches on mental health and addiction. And it's the one thing that comes back to me a lot is we're afraid to say anything from the platform or from the podium or the pulpit because we're afraid of making it worse. And I'm sitting there thinking, you're literally stigmatizing the issue and the people by not saying anything. Even if you don't understand it, just admit that you don't understand it and talk about it and open up a dialogue. And I think it's important that you're doing that through your music.
Yeah. It's and sin has a good way of trying to make us isolating so
Mm,
that we won't go for help. And that's the main thing. I mean, like, yes, Jesus is the provider for our restoration, our healing, and everything that we need. But a lot of times he's going to use other people in the body to be able to make it to where you can get that from him.
that's
Uh,
right.
and that's, yeah, like I said, sin's really good at using things like shame and other things to isolate us no matter what the sin is. But I know what tends to help out a lot is whenever there's somebody that says, "Hey, I've either been going through that or I have or that was my story and everything." And then that starts to make people feel like they can open up
Hmm.
and especially stories and testimonies showing it kind of gives people hope for like, "Hey, I can get out of this too." Um, because like I said before, and I'll get into this in a little bit, but it's one of those things where if you have been in a habit for so long, it's hard to imagine life without it, and sometimes it really stamps out the hope that you have to of getting free. And to share my own story in hopes that this will, um, really be an encouragement to other people as well. I have been out of that before. I was a really uh like I was a pornography addict for a long time, really entrenched in that, and don't want to share anything that make people feel too uncomfortable. But I mean that was my reality for a long time, and the angle that I come at from this topic is a lot of experience because you know I know what it's like to feel like there doesn't seem like there's any way that we're going to get out of this because for me it was 11 years before I got clean. That's
Mm,
a large chunk of my life where it's either hidden away or something that I refuse to acknowledge or whatever, and you know it's it was something that was very hard to imagine life without. And what I've injected into these songs is what I've learned through the experience of getting free from that, where, there's wounds to address. Cause like for me, there was a lot of things concerning my childhood. I didn't have a very traumatic childhood, but there were a lot of things that like, my parents' divorce, that was a epicenter for you know, a lot of issues I would have going forward, and not addressing that for a good long time kept a little root there for that problem to keep feeding off of. And I had to learn, and I didn't even start until I was 20. But, I started learning it's like most of the time, bad habits are a way to try to nurse an inner wound. And it's through the word, it's through regularly being in God's word and in prayer and having support from a good, solid church community that you can find healing for those things. And then it's kind of two sides of one coin. It's like there's the spiritual side of it where it's like you got to have the Lord heal those emotional, mental, inner wounds and everything. But then there's the fact that you spent a lot of years developing habits and responses and coping mechanisms and everything, and you got to work to unlearn a lot of that. There's a
Mm,
very practical end of that where it's like, yeah, you might have got rid of a spiritual root as to why you do these things, but if you've been using whatever bad habit you've had as a coping mechanism for a decade or more, you gotta there's some work that has to be put into um trying to change habits practically where, okay, if you're anxious or you're stressed and you've gone to this to try and avoid facing it, well, not only do you have to get used to facing the stress and anxiety, but you also have to have some other way of, decompressing or whatever you need to rather than going to this substance or whatever
mhm.
this habit is. And so the angle I come at from this is a lot of experience. And, I'm not too worried because it's not a fleshed out topic in conversation, especially in the church. I'm not too worried about saying the wrong things. It's kind of like whenever, if you're like a new Christian, at the very least, the gospel and what Jesus did for you is always the safest place to like fit within if you're going to be talking to a bunch of people about Christianity. And so like just when it comes to addiction, it's like the gospel and what did Jesus do for you? And that's a safe place to stay within. But the fact that it gets the conversation started at all and it gets other people feeling like they can open up and then uh, be find a place for encouragement or whatever they need is also incredibly valuable.
Yeah, that's some good words that need to be said, need to be heard. I think a couple of things off of that in my own research, and I come from a psychological background as well as a theological, and in my um, behavioral science research, I created a term that I call shame existence
Mm,
that people live in. When shame gets a hold of you and you live in this cycle of shame and guilt, it's a shame existence and it literally controls every aspect of your life.
mm-hmm,
And I think a lot of people are living in this shame existence and this shame cycle. And this is for anybody that's listening. Um, we've got to break that.
mm-hmm.
And one of the ways you do that is you talk about it.
Yeah.
You open up to somebody. Josiah, like you were talking about earlier, you're talking about spiritual things, but you're also talking about practical things. We want to be careful not to over spiritualize everything, right?
Yeah.
And just use that as a crutch because there are
Mm-hmm.
things that we need to take responsibility for and do
Yes.
practically. And one of those things is talk about it. Um, and that kind of lends to the reality that we're not in this life alone
Uh-huh.
and we don't have to do this alone. You mentioned David Patacone earlier that you played for his memorial service, and um, I had a chance to talk to him a few months ago. And one of the things we talked about a lot was community,
Yeah.
doing life in community. And you mentioned it, being a part of a church community that is open and caring. You've got to find a community of people to plug into.
Uh-huh.
You cannot stay in isolation with this. All it does is it strengthens the shame cycle, the shame existence. You've got to break it, talk about it. Yes, it's terrifying to do, regardless of your addiction. Pornography, I think, is one of those that has a significant weight to it just because of just the social implications of it all. And
Yeah.
and not that it's worse than any other or
No.
any other is worse than it. But I think we've stayed in the dark too long
Mm-hmm.
about it. And I think especially the church has
Mm-hmm.
not talked about it. I know a lot of churches that have recovery support groups for people who are struggling with alcohol,
Yeah.
or any other substance abuse, but I don't find too many that have anything for pornography addiction. And so there's this shroud
Mm-hmm.
around this topic that keeps it in the dark.
Yeah.
And that is precisely what we don't need to do with this topic. And so I would say anybody listening, break that cycle, talk about it,
Yeah.
obviously with somebody that you trust, with a
Mm-hmm.
trusted friend or your spouse or a pastor or a
Yeah.
counselor. Listen, just go get some counseling.
Mm-hmm.
Set up with a coach or a counselor that is willing to open that conversation with you, and do not do this alone. Find a community of people
Yeah.
that will support you and walk with you through the valley. Does that resonate with you at all? Does that sound like something that people need to hear?
Yes. And to uh throw a little bit of my own experience on top of that, I mean, I mentioned before, I was stuck in this for 11 years.
Hmm.
And it would have been a lot it probably would have been a whole lot faster getting out of this had I actually talked with somebody and really got some intentional help and support a lot sooner. But to what you said, uh, shame is expert at making sure that we're isolated, and in isolation is where bad habits and all other sorts of sins are able to grow.
Hmm.
That's like sunlight for a plant.
Yeah.
And that is where and I get that it feels terrifying to be that sort of vulnerable. And I understand that there's a lot of damage that can happen when you're vulnerable with the wrong people, especially the guys out there that spiritualize everything. And so, like you say, you have any sort of problem and they'll resort to trying to cast a demon out of you. I get that. That's
Hmm.
not, there's a lot of damage that can be done with that sort of thing. But it's also very powerful whenever you're vulnerable with the right people that you can trust and then can come alongside you for that sort of support. That is iron sharpening iron at its best. And
Yeah.
it's incredibly important for that recovery process is having that support. Accountability, yes, but it's also the fact that you know that there's somebody you can go to when you screw up and they're not going to judge you. They're going to instead, not just pray with you and say, I'm here for you, but also ask you intentional questions. Be like, okay, let's kind of replay the moment and everything. So let's see if we can learn something from this so that you can have some ways of breaking this habit for next time, something to think about so you don't screw up again. That having that extra perspective there from somebody who's outside the situation, but is there in your corner is invaluable. And
Hmm.
that is where the risk of vulnerability is worth the reward.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? The Bible has a term for this. It's called confession.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that term has been just kind of drug through the mud all to itself, where people don't really understand it. They think they got to go sit in some little room and, tell their life story and every detail. And then you're told to go pray or read your Bible more, or
Yeah.
do something. It's not about doing anything. The Bible says, confess with one another that you
Hmm.
may be healed.
Yeah.
There's a healing process that begins with confession, and let's not call it confession. Let's just talk about what we're saying. Talk with somebody about it. Share
Yeah.
what's going on, and the other person be able to do the same thing. And there's a
Mm-hmm.
healing that takes place, at least that begins with that process.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, not to over spiritualize it, but the Bible does address it, and it
Yes.
gives us the practical steps to, as humans, to address these things in our lives. So
Mm-hmm.
there's some help there. I'm glad you're talking about it. I think this kind of stuff needs to be talked about more, and you're making the music about it. Do you find you talked about one of your stories where somebody said, "Hey, I'm going through that." Do you find people are generally receptive to the message and what you're sharing from the stage? Is there any resistance to that? What do you experience when you talk about this stuff?
Um, on the topic of addiction and vulnerability and everything, yes, because people are really people who are entrenched in in these habits and are looking for some sort of help are looking for somebody that they can be open with, and that's something I get a better response to than just about anything else. Um, because some people are very clearly desperate for that sort of thing. Um, as far as the gospel in general, because I'll always be given that from the stage, and also sharing that person to person, because my job as a Christian is to just help make heaven populated,
Mhm.
and that gets, of course, your varying responses and stuff. But as far as a positive response that really gets people uh opening up and really coming to me, it's like after the show, just being vulnerable about the addiction side of things, and just being like, hey, here's this topic and we're not shying away from it. That really gets people to open up.
Yeah, and you don't even have to have all the answers, right? It's
No.
just being available and being
Yeah.
willing to be open.
Yeah. And it's like, Lord, I don't have all the answers. I'm not going to claim that, but
Yeah,
we're we're gonna appeal to your wisdom, your mercy, and everything like that, and you'll fill in all the blanks that I got. So
yeah.
that's where we just trust you on
Yeah,
that.
definitely. I hope people are hearing this because I want people to have hope.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much isolation and just living in the shadows. Listen, hope is a confident expectation that things are about to change.
Yeah.
And whether that's on the eternal scope or the day-to-day scope,
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say to anybody that is walking through addiction, struggle of any kind, mental health issues, there is hope.
Yeah.
You can have a confident expectation that things are going to change, and we find that hope ultimately in Christ.
Mm-hmm.
But He gives us, like Josiah was saying, practical steps to walk along that pathway, along that valley that we're walking through. So reach out. We'll have some information in the show notes on
Yeah.
ways to reach out if you're in crisis, or you can reach out to us here. I'm sure if you want to reach out to Firebrand, Josiah is more than happy to have a conversation with you, point in
Mm-hmm.
the right direction.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes, there's hope and there's a way. So let's find that if you're struggling with something.
Yeah.
Josiah, I appreciate you sharing that. Is there anything else that you want to share? Firebrand, music, life, anything? What's on your mind?
Um. Yeah, just be keeping an eye on all of the socials for updates on the EP as things are coming together. I'm in a season where I'm still trying to adapt to a new schedule for the most part, because my wife and I just recently moved, and that means I have a commute to and from work that cuts into my everyday responsibilities. So, uh, being able to say when I know a project is going to be done is still kind of iffy. But the
Mm,
socials, and if you are not wanting to fight against algorithms to get the info you want, um, I do have an email list, and I am fairly active on it. I send out a email at least once a month, if not at the time whenever there's a significant release. Um, Certainly no spamming or anything, but that's a way that I can get info to people without having to fight algorithms and risk a
Yeah,
post or two or three being buried. And then people will even like, I never knew this was happening. It's like, well,
right.
not like I didn't try. So keep an eye out
So
for what's coming out on the horizon.
yeah, so where do people need to go to sign up for that email list or to contact you directly or stay in touch with you?
My website, firebrand.site. Bottom of the homepage is the best place to find it, and you'll be able to sign up for that, and you'll be on the email list. Best place to really be checking everything out that is Firebrand related is the website, because I try to make sure that everything that anybody would need is about right there. So that would be the best place to go.
And that's FYRE brand dot site. Is
Yes.
that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
FIYREBRAND.SITE.
Okay. And we'll put those links in the show notes. There'll be a card or a screen at the end of
Mm-hmm.
this interview as well that'll come up that'll have that site name. So people will have that readily accessible to them. You've got a lot going on. You said you're not really touring much more this year, but we can look forward to an EP. You think that's going to
Mm-hmm.
happen definitely before the end of the year?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think with the way that it's moving, it's gonna, like I said, it's gonna be in that ballpark of like
Okay.
mid-fall.
All right. Hey, Christmas presents, everybody. Christmas presents.
Yeah.
And you don't do just digital stuff. You do actual, I mean, in your hand product too. Is that right?
Yes, I'm a
Okay.
big physical media guy, so CDs at the very least. However, not to say there won't be like maybe a limited cassette release,
Oh,
because I do
wow.
those too.
Very awesome.
Yes,
I love cassettes.
I do too. And what's even better is I duplicate my own cassettes, because I got this little tank here from '95.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah,
Old school.
the cassettes are duplicated in house.
That is very cool. Yeah, I love cassettes, LPs. I try to buy those first if I find them from any
Hmm.
band. My wife and I, when we go to shows, we'll try to buy all the physical stuff we can to support a band. And I think the last LP we bought was from a band that's out of like I think Alaska or something that came down
Oh
here to
wow.
play. We just bought it just to help them with gas money. But the
Hmm.
last cassette that I got was from Demon Hunter.
Oh nice.
Their new album. I got the album and the cassette to go with it. So I have a
Cool.
stack of cassettes still left over from the 80s and the 90s, but also the new stuff that's coming out. So
That's
I'll be
awesome.
looking forward to that. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us. I appreciate it, man. It's a pleasure talking to you as always. And when you do go live again, folks, you got to see Firebrand in person. Just a powerful show. But definitely go download some music, go buy some merch. We'll set up those links so everybody can get to you. If you had a message right now to say to people out there who are listening, this is your closing remark. What would it be? What do you want people to hear today?
Follow Jesus with everything that you have, and and the best way that I would, the best practical thing that I would give is like, if you're gonna be following Jesus, you need to be spending time in the Bible every day.
Hmm.
That's gonna be where you're gonna get the most out of it, is like consistent every day.
That is where he is revealed consistently and clearly. So I
Yes,
appreciate it, man. It's good talking to you, and I hope to see you very, very soon.
absolutely, man. Thank you so much.
All right, have a good night.
You too.